The fourth book of Enoch. Book 4. The Kingdom of Heaven. Chapter 1. Enoch is taken. And it came to pass after this that his name during his lifetime was raised aloft to that Son of Man, and to the Lord of spirits, from amongst those who dwell on the earth. And he was raised aloft on the chariots of the Spirit, and his name vanished among them. And from that day I was no longer numbered amongst them, and he set me between the two winds, between the north and the west, where the angels took the cords to measure for me the place for the elect and righteous. And there I saw the first fathers and the righteous who from the beginning dwell in that place. And it came to pass after this that my spirit was translated, and it ascended into the heavens. I saw the holy sons of God. They were stepping on flames of fire. Their garments were white, and their faces shone like snow. And I saw two streams of fire, and the light of that fire shone like hyacinth, and I fell on my face before the Lord of spirits. And the angel Michael seized me by my right hand and lifted me up and led me forth into all the secrets, and he showed me all the secrets of righteousness. And he showed me all the secrets of the ends of the heaven, and all the chambers of all the stars, and all the luminaries, whence they proceed before the face of the holy ones. And he translated my spirit into the heaven of heavens, and I saw there as it were a structure built of crystals, and between those crystals tongues of living fire. And my spirit saw the girdle which girt that house of fire, and on its four sides were streams full of living fire, and they girt that house. And round about were seraphim, cherubic, and aphanon. And these are they who sleep not and guard the throne of his glory. And I saw angels who could not be counted. 1,000 thousands and 10,000 times 10,000 encircling that house. And Michael, and Raphael, and Gabriel, and Phanuel, and the holy angels who are above the heavens go in and out of that house. And they came forth from that house, and Michael and Gabriel, Raphael, and Phanuel, and many holy angels without number. And with them the head of days, his head white and pure as wool, and his raiment indescribable. And I fell on my face, and my whole body became relaxed, and my spirit was transfigured, and I cried with a loud voice with the spirit of power, and blessed and glorified and extolled. And these blessings which went forth out of my mouth were well-pleasing before that head of days. And that head of days came with Michael and Gabriel, Raphael, and Phanuel, thousands and 10,000s of angels without number. And he came to me and greeted me with his voice, and said unto me, This is the Son of Man who is born unto righteousness, and righteousness abides over him, and the righteousness of the head of days forsakes him not. And he said unto me, He proclaims unto thee peace in the name of the world to come, for from hence has proceeded peace since the creation of the world, and so shall it be unto thee forever and forever and ever. And all shall walk in his ways, since righteousness never forsaketh him. With him will be their dwelling places, and with him their heritage, and they shall not be separated from him forever and ever and ever. And so there shall be length of days with that Son of Man, and the righteous shall have peace and an upright way in the name of the Lord of spirits, forever and ever. Chapter 2. The Luminaries. The book of the courses of the luminaries of the heaven, the relations of each, according to their classes, their dominion and their seasons, according to their names and places of origin, and according to their months, which Uriel, the holy angel, who was with me, who is their guide, showed me. And he showed me all their laws exactly as they are, and how it is with regard to all the years of the world and unto eternity, till the new creation is accomplished which dureth till eternity. And this is the first law of the luminaries. The luminary the sun has its rising in the eastern portals of the heaven, and its setting in the western portals of the heaven. And I saw 6 portals in which the sun rises, and 6 portals in which the sun sets, and the moon rises and sets in these portals, and the leaders of the stars and those whom they lead. 6 in the east and 6 in the west, and all following each other in accurately corresponding order. Also many windows to the right and left of these portals. And first there goes forth the great luminary, named the sun, and his circumference is like the circumference of the heaven, and he is quite filled with illuminating and heating fire. The chariot on which he ascends, the wind drives, and the sun goes down from the heaven and returns through the north in order to reach the east, and is so guided that he comes to the appropriate portal and shines in the face of the heaven. In this way he rises in the first month in the great portal, which is the 4th. And in that 4th portal from which the sun rises in the first month are 12 window openings, from which proceed a flame when they are opened in their season. When the sun rises in the heaven, he comes forth through that 4th portal 30 mornings in succession, and sets accurately in the 4th portal in the west of the heaven. And during this period the day becomes daily longer and the night nightly shorter to the 30th morning. On that day the day is longer than the night by a 9th part, and the day amounts exactly to 10 parts and the night to 8 parts. And the sun rises from that 4th portal and sets in the 4th, and returns to the fifth portal of the east 30 mornings, and rises from it and sets in the fifth portal. And then the day becomes longer by 2 parts and amounts to 11 parts, and the night becomes shorter and amounts to 7 parts. And it returns to the east and enters into the sixth portal, and rises and sets in the sixth portal 1 and 30 mornings on account of its sign. On that day the day becomes longer than the night, and the day becomes double the night, and the day becomes 12 parts, and the night is shortened and becomes 6 parts. And the sun mounts up to make the day shorter and the night longer, and the sun returns to the east and enters into the sixth portal and rises from it, and sets 30 mornings. And when 30 mornings are accomplished, the day decreases by exactly 1 part, and becomes 11 parts, and the night 7. And the sun goes forth from that sixth portal in the west, and goes to the east and rises in the fifth portal for 30 mornings, and sets in the west again in the fifth western portal. On that day the day decreases by 2 parts, and amounts to 10 parts and the night to 8 parts. And the sun goes forth from that fifth portal and sets in the fifth portal of the west, and rises in the fourth portal for 1 and 30 mornings on account of its sign, and sets in the west. On that day the day is equalized with the night, and the night amounts to 9 parts and the day to 9 parts. And the sun rises from that portal and sets in the west, and returns to the east and rises 30 mornings in the third portal and sets in the west in the third portal. And on that day the night becomes longer than the day, and night becomes longer than night, and day shorter than day till the 30th morning, and the night amounts exactly to 10 parts and the day to 8 parts. And the sun rises from that third portal and sets in the third portal in the west, and returns to the east, and for 30 mornings rises in the second portal in the east, and in like manner sets in the second portal in the west of the heaven. And on that day the night amounts to 11 parts and the day to 7 parts. And the sun rises on that day from that second portal and sets in the west in the second portal, and returns to the east into the first portal for 1 and 30 mornings, and sets in the first portal in the west of the heaven. And on that day the night becomes longer and amounts to the double of the day. And the night amounts exactly to 12 parts and the day to 6. And the sun has traversed the divisions of his orbit and turns again on those divisions of his orbit, and enters that portal 30 mornings and sets also in the west opposite to it. And on that night has the night decreased in length by a 9th part, and the night has become 11 parts and the day 7 parts. And the sun has returned and entered into the second portal in the east, and returns on those his divisions of his orbit for 30 mornings, rising and setting. And on that day the night decreases in length, and the night amounts to 10 parts and the day to 8. And on that day the sun rises from that portal, and sets in the west, and returns to the east, and rises in the third portal for 1 and 30 mornings, and sets in the west of the heaven. On that day the night decreases and amounts to 9 parts, and the day to 9 parts, and the night is equal to the day, and the year is exactly as to its days 364. And the length of the day and of the night, and the shortness of the day and of the night arise through the course of the sun. These distinctions are made. So it comes that its course becomes daily longer, and its course nightly shorter. And this is the law in the course of the sun, and his return as often as he returns 60 times and rises forever and ever. And that which rises is the great luminary, and is so named according to its appearance, according as the Lord commanded. As he rises, so he sets and decreases not, and rests not, but runs day and night, and his light is 7-fold brighter than that of the moon, but as regards size they are both equal. And after this law I saw another law dealing with the smaller luminary, which is named the moon. And her circumference is like the circumference of the heaven, and her chariot in which she rides is driven by the wind, and light is given to her in measure. And her rising and setting change every month, and her days are like the days of the sun, and when her light is uniform, it amounts to the 7th part of the light of the sun. And thus she rises. And her first phase in the east comes forth on the 30th morning. And on that day she becomes visible and constitutes for you the first phase of the moon on the 30th day, together with the sun in the portal where the sun rises. And the 1/2 of her goes forth by a 7th part, and her whole circumference is empty, without light, with the exception of 1/7 part of it, the 14th part of her light. And when she receives 1/7 part of the half of her light amounts to 1/7 part and the half thereof. And she sets with the sun, and when the sun rises the moon rises with him and receives the half of 1 part of light, and in that night in the beginning of her morning in the commencement of the lunar day, the moon sets with the sun, and is invisible that night with the 14 parts and the half of 1 of them. And she rises on that day with exactly a 7th part, and comes forth and recedes from the rising of the sun, and in her remaining days she becomes bright in the 13 parts. And I saw another course, a law for her, how according to that law, she performs her monthly revolution. And all these Uriel, the holy angel who is the leader of them all, showed to me, and their positions, and I wrote down their positions as he showed them to me, and I wrote down their months as they were, and the appearance of their lights till 15 days were accomplished. In single seventh parts she accomplishes all her light in the east, and in single seventh parts, accomplishes all her darkness in the west. And in certain months she alters her settings, and in certain months she pursues her own peculiar course. In 2 months the moon sets with the sun. In those 2 middle portals, the third and the fourth, she goes forth for 7 days, and turns about and returns again through the portal where the sun rises, and accomplishes all her light, and she recedes from the sun, and in 8 days enters the 6th portal from which the sun goes forth. And when the sun goes forth from the 4th portal she goes forth 7 days, until she goes forth from the 5th and turns back again in 7 days into the 4th portal, and accomplishes all her light. And she recedes and enters into the 1st portal in 8 days. And she returns again in 7 days into the 4th portal from which the sun goes forth. Thus I saw their position, how the moons rose in the sunset in those days. And if 5 years are added together the sun has an overplus of 30 days, and all the days which accrue to it for one of those 5 years, when they are full, amount to 364 days. And the overplus of the sun and of the stars amounts to 6 days. In 5 years 6 days every year come to 30 days. And the moon falls behind the sun and stars to the number of 30 days. And the sun and the stars bring in all the years exactly, so that they do not advance or delay their position by a single day unto eternity, but complete the years with perfect justice in 364 days. In 3 years there are 1092 days, and in 5 years 1820 days, so that in 8 years there are 2912 days. For the moon alone the days amount in 3 years to 1062 days, and in 5 years she falls 50 days behind. To the sum there is 5 to be added 62 days. And in 5 years there are 1770 days, so that for the moon the days 6 and 8 years amount to 21,832 days. For in 8 years she falls behind to the amount of 80 days, all the 17 days she falls behind in 8 years are 80. And the year is accurately completed in conformity with their world stations and the stations of the sun, which rise from the portals through which it rises and sets 30 days. And the leaders of the heads of the thousands, who are placed over the whole creation and over all the stars, have also to do with the 4 intercalary days, being inseparable from their office, according to the reckoning of the year, and these render service on the 4 days, which are not reckoned in the reckoning of the year. And owing to the men go wrong therein, for those luminaries truly render service on the world stations, one in the 1st portal, one in the 3rd portal of the heaven, one in the 4th portal, and one in the 6th portal, and the exactness of the year is accomplished through its separate 364 stations. For the signs and the times and the years and the days the angel Uriel showed to me, whom the Lord of glory hath set forever over all the luminaries of the heaven, in the heaven and in the world, that they should rule on the face of the heaven, and be seen on the earth, and be leaders for the day and the night, and all the ministering creatures which make their revolution and all the chariots of the heaven. In like manner 12 doors Uriel showed me open in the circumference of the sun's chariot in the heaven, through which the rays of the sun break forth. And from them is warmth diffused over the earth, when they are opened at their appointed seasons. And for the winds and the spirit of the dew when they are opened, standing open in the heavens at the ends. As for the 12 portals in the heaven at the ends of the earth, out of which go forth the sun, moon, and stars, and all the works of heaven in the east and in the west. There are many windows open to the left and right of them, and one window at its season produces warmth, corresponding to those doors from which the stars come forth, according as he has commanded them, and wherein they set corresponding to their number. And I saw chariots in the heaven, running in the world, above those portals in which revolve the stars that never set. And one is larger than all the rest, and it is that makes its course through the entire world. And at the ends of the earth I saw 12 portals open to all the quarters from which the winds go forth and blow over the earth. 3 of them are open on the face of the heavens, and 3 in the west, and 3 on the right of the heaven, and 3 on the left. And the 3 first are those of the east, and 3 are of the north, and 3 after those on the left of the south, and 3 of the west. Through 4 of these come winds of blessing and prosperity, and from those 8 come hurtful winds. When they are sent, they bring destruction on all the earth and on the water upon it, and on all who dwell thereon, and on everything which is in the water and on the land. And the first wind from those portals, called the east wind, comes forth through the 1st portal which is in the east, inclining towards the south. From it come forth desolation, drought, heat, and destruction. And through the 2nd portal in the middle comes what is fitting, and from it there come rain and fruitfulness and prosperity and dew. And through the third portal which lies toward the north come cold and drought. And after these come forth the south winds through 3 portals. Through the first portal of them inclining to the east comes forth a hot wind. And through the middle portal next to it there come forth fragrant smells, and dew and rain, and prosperity and health. And through the third portal lying to the west come forth dew and rain, locusts and desolation. And after these the north winds. From the 7th portal in the east come dew and rain, locusts and desolation. And from the middle portal come in a direct direction health and rain and dew and prosperity. And through the third portal in the west come cloud and hoarfrost, and snow and rain, and dew and locusts. And after these 4 are the west winds. Through the first portal adjoining the north come forth dew and hoarfrost, and cold and snow and frost. And from the middle portal come forth dew and rain, and prosperity and blessing. And through the last portal which adjoins the south come forth drought and desolation, and burning and destruction. And the 12 portals of the 4 quarters of the heaven are therewith completed, and all their laws and all their plagues and all their benefactions have I shown to thee, my son Methuselah. And the first quarter is called the east because it is the first. And the second, the south, because the Most High will descend there, yea, there in quite a special sense will he who is blessed forever descend. And the west quarter is named the diminished because there all the luminaries of the heaven wane and go down. And the fourth quarter named the north is divided into 3 parts. The first of them is for the dwelling of men. And the second contains seas of water, and the abysses and forests and rivers, and darkness and clouds, and the third part contains the garden of righteousness. I saw 7 high mountains, higher than all the mountains which are on the earth, and thence comes forth hoarfrost, and days, seasons, and years pass away. I saw 7 rivers on the earth larger than all the rivers. One of them coming from the west pours its waters into the great sea. And these 2 come from the north to the sea and pour their waters into the Erythraean Sea in the east. And the remaining 4 come forth on the side of the north to their own sea, 2 of them to the Erythraean Sea, and 2 into the great sea, and discharge themselves there, and some say, into the desert. 7 great islands I saw in the sea and in the mainland. 2 in the mainland and 5 in the great sea. And the names of the sun are the following. The first Orgers, and the second Tomas. And the moon has 4 names. The first name is Asanja, the second Ebla, the third Benes, and the fourth Eri. These are the 2 great luminaries. Their circumference is like the circumference of the heaven, and the size of the circumference of both is alike. In the circumference of the sun there are 7 portions of light which are added to it more than to the moon, and in definite measures it is transferred till the 7th portion of the sun is exhausted. And they set and enter the portals of the west, and make their revolution by the north, and come forth through the eastern portals on the face of the heaven. And when the moon rises 1/14th part appears in the heaven. The light becomes full in her, on the 14th day she accomplishes her light. And 15 parts of light are transferred to her till the 15th day her light is accomplished, according to the sign of the year, and she becomes 15 parts, and the moon grows by 14th parts. And in her waning decreases on the first day to 14 parts of her light, on the second to 13 parts of light, on the third to 12, on the fourth to 11, on the fifth to 10, on the 6th to 9, on the 7th to 8, on the 8th to 7, on the 9th to 6, on the 10th to 5, on the 11th to 4, on the 12th to 3, on the 13th to 2, on the 14th to the half of a 7th, and all her remaining light disappears wholly on the 15th. And in certain months the month has 29 days and once 28. And Uriel showed me another law. When light is transferred to the moon, and on which side it is transferred to her by the sun. During all the period during which the moon is growing in her light, she is transferring it to herself, when opposite to the sun during 14 days her light is accomplished in the heaven, and when she is illumined throughout, her light is accomplished full in the heaven. And on the first day she is called the new moon, for on that day the light rises upon her. She becomes full moon exactly on the day when the sun sets in the west, and from the east she rises at night, and the moon shines the whole night through till the sun rises over against her, and the moon is seen over against the sun. On the side whence the light of the moon comes forth, there again she wanes till all the light vanishes, and all the days of the month are at an end, and her circumference is empty, void of light. And 3 months she makes of 30 days, and at her time she makes 3 months of 29 days each, in which she accomplishes her waning in the first period of time, and in the first portal for 177 days. And in the time of her going out she appears for 3 months 30 days each, and for 3 months she appears 29 each. At night she appears like a man for 20 days each time, and by day she appears like the heaven, and there is nothing else in her save her light. And now, my son, I have shown thee everything, and the law of all the stars of the heaven is completed. And he showed me all the laws of these for every day, and for every season of bearing rule, and for every year, and for its going forth, and for the order prescribed to it every month and every week. And the waning of the moon which takes place in the sixth portal. For in this sixth portal her light is accomplished. And after that there is the beginning of the waning which takes place in the first portal in its season, till 177 days are accomplished. Reckoned according to weeks, 25 and 2 days. She falls behind the sun in the order of the stars exactly 5 days in the course of one period, and when this place which thou seest has been traversed. Such is the picture and sketch of every luminary which Uriel the archangel, who is their leader, showed unto me. Chapter 3. Heavenly Tablets. And in those days the angel Uriel answered and said to me, Behold, I have shown thee everything, Enoch, and I have revealed everything to thee that thou shouldst see this sun and this moon, and the leaders of the stars of the heaven and all those who turn them, their tasks and times and departures. And in the days of the sinners the years shall be shortened, and their seed shall be tardy on their lands and fields. And all things on the earth shall alter and shall not appear in their time. The rain shall be kept back and the heaven shall withhold it. And in those times the fruits of the earth shall be backward and shall not grow in their time, and the fruits of the trees shall be withheld in their time. And the moon shall alter her order and not appear at her time. And in those days the sun shall be seen, and he shall journey in the evening on the extremity of the great chariot in the west, and shall shine more brightly than accords with the order of light. And many chiefs of the stars shall transgress the order, and these shall alter their orbits and tasks, and not appear at the seasons prescribed to them. And the whole order of the stars shall be concealed from the sinners, and the thoughts of those on the earth shall err concerning them. And they shall be altered from all their ways. Yea, they shall err and take them to be gods. And evil shall be multiplied upon them, and punishment shall come upon them so as to destroy all. And he said unto me, Observe, Enoch, these heavenly tablets and read what is written thereon, and mark every individual fact. And I observed the heavenly tablets, and read everything which was written and understood everything, and read the book of all the deeds of mankind, and of all the children of flesh that shall be upon the earth to the remotest generations. And forthwith I blessed the great Lord the King of glory forever, in that he has made all the works of the world. And I extolled the Lord because of his patience and blessed him because of the children of men. And after that I said, Blessed is the man who dies in righteousness and goodness, concerning whom there is no book of unrighteousness written, and against whom no day of judgment shall be found. And those 7 holy ones brought me and placed me on the earth before the door of my house, and said to me, Declare everything to thy son Methuselah, and show to all thy children that no flesh is righteous in the sight of the Lord, for he is their creator. 1 year we will leave thee with thy son, till thou givest thy commands, that thou mayst teach thy children and record for them, and testify to all thy children, and in the 2nd year they shall take thee from their midst. Let thy heart be strong, for the good shall announce righteousness to the good, the righteous with the righteous shall rejoice, and shall offer congratulation to one another. But the sinners shall die with the sinners and the apostate go down with the apostate. And those who practice righteousness shall die on account of the deeds of men, and be taken away on account of the doings of the godless. And in those days they ceased to speak to me, and I came to my people, blessing the Lord of the world. Chapter 4. 1 year to record. And now, my son Methuselah, all these things I am recounting to thee and writing down for thee. And I have revealed to thee everything, and given thee books concerning all these. So preserve, my son Methuselah, the books from thy father's hand, and see that thou deliver them to the generations of the world. I have given wisdom to thee and to thy children and thy children that shall be to thee, that they may give it to their children for generations, this wisdom that passeth their thought. And those who understand it shall not sleep but shall listen with the ear that they may learn this wisdom, and it shall please those that eat thereof better than good food. Blessed are all the righteous, blessed are all those who walk in the way of righteousness and sin, not as the sinners. In the reckoning of all their days in which the sun traverses the heaven, entering into and departing from the portals for 30 days, with the heads of thousands of the order of the stars, together with the 4 which are intercalated which divide the 4 portions of the year, which lead them and enter with them 4 days. Owing to them men shall be at fault and not reckon them in the whole reckoning of the year. Yea, men shall be at fault and not recognize them accurately. For they belong to the reckoning of the year and are truly recorded forever, 1 in the 1st portal and 1 in the 3rd, and 1 in the 4th and 1 in the 6th, and the year is completed in 364 days. And the account thereof is accurate, and the recorded reckoning thereof exact, for the luminaries, and months and festivals, and years and days, has Uriel shown and revealed to me, to whom the Lord of the whole creation of the world hath subjected the host of heaven. And he has power over night and day in the heaven to cause the light to give light to men, sun, moon, and stars, and all the powers of the heaven which revolve in their circular chariots. And these are the orders of the stars, which set in their places, and in their seasons and festivals and months. And these are the names of those who lead them, who watch that they enter at their times, in their orders, in their seasons, in their months, in their periods of dominion, and in their positions. Their 4 leaders who divide the 4 parts of the year enter first, and after them the 12 leaders of the orders who divide the months, and for the 360, there are heads over thousands who divide the days, and for the 4 intercalary days, there are the leaders which sunder the 4 parts of the year. And these heads over thousands are intercalated between leader and leader, each behind a station, but their leaders make the division. And these are the names of the leaders who divide the 4 parts of the year which are ordained: Milkiel, Hilemelech, and Melagel, and Neril. And the names of those who lead them: Admiral, and Ajasisel, and Elamiel. These 3 follow the leaders of the orders, and there is one that follows the 3 leaders of the orders which follow those leaders of stations that divide the 4 parts of the year. In the beginning of the year Melchijel rises first and rules, who is named Timanian's son, and all the days of his dominion whilst he bears rule are 91 days. And these are the signs of the days which are to be seen on earth in the days of his dominion: sweat, and heat, and calms, and all the trees bear fruit, and leaves are produced on all the trees, and the harvest of wheat, and the rose flowers, and all the flowers which come forth in the field, but the trees of the winter season become withered. And these are the names of the leaders which are under them: Berkel, Zelebsel, and another who is added ahead of 1,000, called Hilujasif. And the days of the dominion of this are at an end. The next leader after him is Hilemelech, whom one names the shining sun, and all the days of his light are 91 days. And these are the signs of days on the earth: glowing heat and dryness, and the trees ripen their fruits and produce all their fruits ripe and ready, and the sheep pair and become pregnant, and all the fruits of the earth are gathered in, and everything that is in the fields, and the winepress. These things take place in the days of his dominion. These are the names, and the orders, and the leaders of those heads of thousands: Gedalgel, Keel, and Heel, and the name of the head of 1,000 which is added to them, Asphal. And the days of his dominion are at an end. Chapter 5. Visions. And now, my son Methuselah, I will show thee all my visions which I have seen, recounting them before thee. 2 visions I saw before I took a wife, and the one was quite unlike the other. The first when I was learning to write. The second before I took thy mother I saw a terrible vision. And regarding them I prayed to the Lord. I had laid me down in the house of my grandfather Mahalalel. I saw in a vision how the heaven collapsed and was borne off and fell to the earth. And when it fell to the earth I saw how the earth was swallowed up in a great abyss, and mountains were suspended on mountains, and hills sank down on hills, and high trees were rent from their stems and hurled down and sunk in the abyss. And thereupon a word fell into my mouth and I lifted up to cry aloud, and said, The earth is destroyed. And my grandfather Mahalalel waked me as I lay near him, and said unto me, Why dost thou cry so, my son, and why dost thou make such lamentation? And I recounted to him the whole vision which I had seen, and he said unto me, A terrible thing hast thou seen, my son, and of grave moment is thy dream vision as to the secrets. If all the sin of the earth, it must sink into the abyss and be destroyed with a great destruction. And now, my son, arise and make petition to the Lord of glory, since thou art a believer that a remnant may remain on the earth, and that he may not destroy the whole earth. My son, from heaven all this will come upon the earth, and upon the earth there will be great destruction. After that I arose and prayed and implored and besought, and wrote down my prayer for the generations of the world, and I will show everything to thee, my son Methuselah. And when I had gone forth below and seen the heaven and the sun rising in the east, and the moon setting in the west, and a few stars, and the whole earth, and everything as he had known it in the beginning, then I blessed the Lord of judgment, and extolled him, because he had made the sun to go forth from the windows of the east, and he ascended and rose on the face of the heaven, and set out and kept traversing the path shown unto him. And I lifted up my hands in righteousness and blessed the Holy and Great One and spake with the breath of my mouth, and with the tongue of flesh which God has made for the children of the flesh of men that they should speak therewith, and he gave them breath and a tongue and a mouth that they should speak therewith. Blessed be thou, O Lord, King, great and mighty in thy greatness, Lord of the whole creation of the heaven, King of kings and God of the whole world. And thy power and kingship and greatness abide forever and ever, and throughout all generations thy dominion, and all the heavens are thy throne forever, and the whole earth thy footstool forever and ever. For thou hast made and thou rulest all things, and nothing is too hard for thee. Wisdom departs not from the place of thy throne, nor turns away from thy presence. And thou knowest and seest and hearest everything, and there is nothing hidden from thee, for thou seest everything. And now the angels of thy heavens are guilty of trespass, and upon the flesh of men abideth thy wrath until the great day of judgment. And now, O God and Lord and great King, I implore and beseech thee to fulfill my prayer to leave me a posterity on earth, and not destroy all the flesh of man, and make the earth without inhabitant, so that there should be an eternal destruction. And now, my Lord, destroy from the earth the flesh which has aroused thy wrath, but the flesh of righteousness and uprightness establish as a plant of the eternal seed, and hide not thy face from the prayer of thy servant, O Lord. And after this I saw another dream, and I will show the whole dream to thee, my son. And Enoch lifted up and spake to his son Methuselah. To thee, my son, will I speak. Hear my words, incline thine ear to the dream vision of thy father. Before I took thy mother Edna, I saw in a vision on my bed, and behold, a bull came forth from the earth, and that bull was white, and after it came forth a heifer, and along with this came forth 2 bulls, one of them black and the other red. And that black bull gored the red one and pursued him over the earth, and thereupon I could no longer see that red bull. But that black bull grew, and that heifer went with him, and I saw that many oxen proceeded from him which resembled and followed him. And that cow, that first one, went from the presence of that first bull in order to seek that red one, but found him not, and lamented with a great lamentation over him and sought him. And I looked till that first bull came to her and quieted her, and from that time onward she cried no more. And after that she bore another white bull, and after him she bore many bulls and black cows. And I saw in my sleep that white bull likewise grow and become a great white bull, and from him proceeded many white bulls, and they resembled him. And they began to beget many white bulls, which resembled them, one following the other, many. And again I saw with mine eyes as I slept, and I saw the heaven above, and behold, a star fell from heaven, and it arose and eat and pastured amongst those oxen. And after that I saw the large and the black oxen, and behold, they all changed their stalls and pastures and their cattle, and began to live with each other. And again I saw in the vision, and looked towards the heaven, and behold, I saw many stars descend and cast themselves down from heaven to that first star, and they became bulls amongst those cattle, and pastured with them amongst them. And I looked at them and saw, and behold, they all let out their privy members, like horses, and began to cover the cows of the oxen, and they all became pregnant and bare elephants, camels, and asses. And all the oxen feared them and were affrighted at them, and began to bite with their teeth and to devour, and to gore with their horns. And they began, moreover, to devour those oxen, and behold, all the children of the earth began to tremble and quake before them, and to flee from them. And again I saw how they began to gore each other, and to devour each other, and the earth began to cry aloud. And I raised mine eyes again to heaven, and I saw in the vision, and behold, there came forth from heaven beings who were like white men. And 4 went forth from that place, and 3 with them. And those 3 that had last come forth grasped me by my hand and took me up away from the generations of the earth, and raised me up to a lofty place, and showed me a tower raised high above the earth, and all the hills were lower. And one said unto me, Remain here till thou seest everything that befalls those elephants, camels, and asses, and the stars and the oxen, and all of them. And I saw one of those 4 who had come forth first, and he seized that first star which had fallen from the heaven, and bound it hand and foot, and cast it into an abyss. Now that abyss was narrow and deep, and horrible and dark. And one of them drew a sword, and gave it to those elephants and camels and asses. Then they began to smite each other, and the whole earth quaked because of them. And as I was beholding in the vision, lo, one of those 4 who had come forth stoned them from heaven, and gathered and took all the great stars whose privy members were like those of horses, and bound them all hand and foot, and cast them in an abyss of the earth. And one of those 4 went to that white bull and instructed him in a secret without his being terrified. He was born a bull and became a man, and built for himself a great vessel and dwelt thereon, and 3 bulls dwelt with him in that vessel, and they were covered in. And again I raised mine eyes towards heaven and saw a lofty roof, with 7 water torrents thereon, and those torrents flowed with much water into an enclosure. And I saw again, and behold, fountains were opened on the surface of that great enclosure, and that water began to swell and rise upon the surface, and I saw that enclosure till all its surface was covered with water. And the water, the darkness, and mist increased upon it, and as I looked at the height of that water had risen above the height of that enclosure, and was streaming over that enclosure, and it stood upon the earth. And all the cattle of that enclosure were gathered together until I saw how they sank and were swallowed up and perished in that water. But that vessel floated on the water, while all the oxen and elephants and camels and asses sank to the bottom with all the animals, so that I could no longer see them, and they were not able to escape, perished and sank into the depths. And again I saw in the vision till those water torrents were removed from that high roof, and the chasms of the earth were leveled up and other abysses were opened. Then the water began to run down into these, till the earth became visible, but that vessel settled on the earth, and the darkness retired and light appeared. But that white bull which had become a man came out of that vessel, and the 3 bulls with him, and one of those 3 was white like that bull, and one of them was red as blood, and one black. And that white bull departed from them. And they began to bring forth beasts of the field and birds, so that there arose different genera: lions, tigers, wolves, dogs, hyenas, wild boars, foxes, squirrels, swine, falcons, vultures, kites, eagles, and ravens, and among them was born a white bull. And they began to bite one another, but that white bull which was born amongst them begat a wild ass and a white bull with it, and the wild asses multiplied. But that bull which was born from him begat a black wild boar and a white sheep, and the former begat many boars, but that sheep begat 12 sheep. And when those 12 sheep had grown, they gave up one of them to the asses, and those asses again gave up that sheep to the wolves, and that sheep grew up among the wolves. And the Lord brought the 11 sheep to live with it, and to pasture with it among the wolves. And they multiplied and became many flocks of sheep. And the wolves began to fear them, and they oppressed them until they destroyed cry aloud on account of their little ones, and to complain unto their Lord. And a sheep which had been saved from the wolves fled and escaped to the wild asses, and I saw the sheep how they lamented and cried, and besought their Lord with all their might, till that Lord of the sheep descended at the voice of the sheep from a lofty abode, and came to them and pastured them. And he called that sheep which had escaped the wolves, and spake with it concerning the wolves that it should admonish them not to touch the sheep. And the sheep went to the wolves according to the word of the Lord, and another sheep met it and went with it, and the 2 went and entered together into the assembly of those wolves, and spake with them, and admonished them not to touch the sheep from henceforth. And thereupon I saw the wolves, and how they oppressed the sheep exceedingly with all their power, and the sheep cried aloud. And the Lord came to the sheep, and they began to smite those wolves, and the wolves began to make lamentation, but the sheep became quiet and forthwith ceased to cry out. And I saw the sheep till they departed from amongst the wolves, but the eyes of the wolves were blinded, and those wolves departed in pursuit of the sheep with all their power. And the Lord of the sheep went with them, as their leader, and all his sheep followed him. And his face was dazzling and glorious and terrible to behold. But the wolves began to pursue those sheep till they reached a sea of water. And that sea was divided, and the water stood on this side and on that before their face, and their Lord led them and placed himself between them and the wolves. And as those wolves did not yet see the sheep, they proceeded into the midst of that sea, and the wolves followed the sheep, and those wolves ran after them into that sea. And when they saw the Lord of the sheep, they turned to flee before his face, but that sea gathered itself together, and became as it had been created, and the water swelled and rose till it covered those wolves. And I saw till all the wolves who pursued those sheep perished and were drowned. But the sheep escaped from that water and went forth into a wilderness, where there was no water and no grass, and they began to open their eyes and to see. And I saw the Lord of the sheep pasturing them and giving them water and grass, and that sheep going and leading them. And that sheep ascended to the summit of that lofty rock, and the Lord of the sheep sent it to them. And after that I saw the Lord of the sheep who stood before them, and his appearance was great and terrible and majestic, and all those sheep saw him and were afraid before his face. And they all feared and trembled because of him, and they cried to that sheep with them which was amongst them, "We are not able to stand before our Lord or to behold him." And that sheep which led them again ascended to the summit of that rock, but the sheep began to be blinded, and to wander from the way which he had showed them, but that sheep wot not thereof. And the Lord of the sheep was wrathful exceedingly against them, and that sheep discovered it, and went down from the summit of the rock, and came to the sheep, and found the greatest part of them blinded and fallen away. And when they saw it they feared and trembled at its presence, and desired to return to their folds. And that sheep took other sheep with it, and came to those sheep which had fallen away, and began to slay them, and the sheep feared its presence, and thus that sheep brought back those sheep that had fallen away, and they returned to their folds. And I saw in this vision till that sheep became a man and built a house for the Lord of the sheep, and placed all the sheep in that house. And I saw till this sheep which had met that sheep which led them fell asleep. And I saw till all the great sheep perished and little ones arose in their place, and they came to a pasture, and approached a stream of water. Then that sheep, their leader which had become a man, withdrew from them and fell asleep, and all the sheep saw it and cried over it with a great crying. And I saw till they left off crying for that sheep and crossed that stream of water, and there arose the two sheep as leaders in the place of those which had led them and fallen asleep. And I saw till the sheep came to a goodly place, and a pleasant and glorious land, and I saw till those sheep were satisfied, and that house stood amongst them in the pleasant land. And sometimes their eyes were opened, and sometimes blinded, till another sheep arose and led them and brought them all back, and their eyes were opened. And the dogs and the foxes and the wild boars began to devour those sheep, till the Lord of the sheep raised up another sheep a ram from their midst, which led them. And that ram began to butt on either side those dogs, foxes, and wild boars, till he had destroyed them all. And that sheep whose eyes were open saw that ram, which was amongst the sheep, till it forsook its glory, and began to butt those sheep and trampled upon them, and behaved itself unseemly. And the Lord of the sheep sent the lamb to another lamb, and raised it to being a ram and leader of the sheep, instead of that ram which had forsaken its glory. And it went to it and spake to it alone, and raised it to being a ram, and made it the prince and leader of the sheep, but during all these things those dogs oppressed the sheep. And the first ram pursued that second ram, and that second ram arose and fled before it, and I saw till those dogs pulled down the first ram. And that second ram arose and led the little sheep. And those sheep grew and multiplied, but all the dogs and foxes and wild boars feared and fled before it, and that ram butted and killed the wild beasts, and those wild beasts had no longer any power among the 49 sheep, and robbed them no more of aught. And that ram begat many sheep and fell asleep, and a little sheep became ram in its stead, and became prince and leader of those sheep, and that house became great and broad, and it was built for those sheep. A tower lofty and great was built on the house for the Lord of the sheep, and that house was low, but the tower was elevated and lofty, and the Lord of the sheep stood on that tower, and they offered a full table before him. And again I saw those sheep that they again erred and went many ways, and forsook their house, and the Lord of the sheep called some from amongst the sheep, and sent them to the sheep, but the sheep began to slay them. And one of them was saved and was not slain, and it sped away and cried aloud over the sheep, and they sought to slay it, but the Lord of the sheep saved it from the sheep, and brought it up to me, and caused it to dwell there. And many other sheep he sent to those sheep to testify unto them and lament over them. And after that I saw that when they forsook the house of the Lord and his tower, they fell away entirely, and their eyes were blinded, and I saw the Lord of the sheep, how he wrought much slaughter amongst them in their herds, until those sheep invited that slaughter and betrayed his place. And he gave them over into the hands of the lions and tigers, and wolves and hyenas, and into the hand of the foxes, and to all the wild beasts, and those wild beasts began to tear in pieces those sheep. And I saw that he forsook their house and their tower and gave them all into the hand of the lions, to tear and devour them, into the hand of all the wild beasts. And I began to cry aloud with all my power, and to appeal to the Lord of the sheep, and to represent to him in regard to the sheep that they were devoured by all the wild beasts. But he remained unmoved, though he saw it, and rejoiced that they were devoured and swallowed and robbed, and left them to be devoured in the hand of all the beasts. And he called 70 shepherds, and cast those sheep to them that they might pasture them, and he spake to the shepherds and their companions. Let each individual of you pasture the sheep henceforward, and everything that I shall command you that do ye. And I will deliver them over unto you duly numbered, and tell you which of them are to be destroyed, and them destroy ye. And he gave over unto them those sheep. And he called another and spake unto him. Observe and mark everything that the shepherds will do to those sheep, for they will destroy more of them than I have commanded them. And every excess and the destruction which will be wrought through the shepherds, record how many they destroy according to my command, and how many according to their own caprice. Record against every individual shepherd all the destruction he effects. And read out before me by number how many they destroy, and how many they deliver over for destruction, that I may have this as a testimony against them, and know every deed of the shepherds, that I may comprehend and see what they do, whether or not they abide by my command which I have commanded them. But they shall not know it, and thou shalt not declare it to them, nor admonish them, but only record against each individual all the destruction which the shepherds effect each in his time, and lay it all before me. And I saw till those shepherds pastured in their season, and they began to slay and to destroy more than they were bidden, and they delivered those sheep into the hand of the lions. And the lions and tigers eat and devoured the greater part of those sheep, and the wild boars eat along with them, and they burnt that tower and demolished that house. And I became exceedingly sorrowful over that tower, because that house of the sheep was demolished, and afterwards I was unable to see if those sheep entered that house. And the shepherds and their associates delivered over those sheep to all the wild beasts to devour them, and each one of them received in his time a definite number. It was written by the other in a book how many each one of them destroyed of them. And each one slew and destroyed many more than was prescribed, and I began to weep and lament on account of those sheep. And thus in the vision I saw that one who wrote, how he wrote down every one that was destroyed by those shepherds, day by day, and carried up and laid down, and showed actually the whole book to the Lord of the sheep, everything that they had done, and all that each one of them had made away with, and all that they had given over to destruction. And the book was read before the Lord of the sheep, and he took the book from his hand and read it and sealed it and laid it down. And forthwith I saw how the shepherds pastured for 12 hours, and behold 3 of those sheep turned back and came and entered and began to build up all that had fallen down of that house, but the wild boars tried to hinder them, but they were not able. And they began again to build as before, and they reared up that tower, and it was named the High Tower, and they began again to place a table before the tower, but all the bread on it was polluted and not pure. And as touching all this the eyes of those sheep were blinded, so that they saw not, and their shepherds likewise, and they delivered them in large numbers to their shepherds for destruction, and they trampled the sheep with their feet and devoured them. And the Lord of the sheep remained unmoved till all the sheep were dispersed over the field and mingled with them, and they did not save them out of the hand of the beasts. And this one who wrote the book carried it up, and showed it and read it before the Lord of the sheep, and implored him on their account, and besought him on their account, as he showed him all the doings of the shepherds, and gave testimony before him against all the shepherds. And he took the actual book and laid it down beside him and departed. And I saw till that in this manner 35 shepherds undertook the pasturing, and they severally completed their periods as did the first, and others received them into their hands, to pasture them for their period, each shepherd in his own period. And after that I saw in my vision all the birds of heaven coming, the eagles, the vultures, the kites, the ravens, but the eagles led all the birds, and they began to devour those sheep, and to pick out their eyes, and to devour their flesh. And the sheep cried out because their flesh was being devoured by the birds, and as for me I looked and lamented in my sleep over that shepherd who pastured the sheep. And I saw until those sheep were devoured by the dogs and eagles and kites, and they left neither flesh nor skin, nor sinew remaining on them till only their bones stood there. And their bones too fell to the earth, and the sheep became few. And I saw until that 23 had undertaken the pasturing and completed in their several periods 58 times. But the whole lambs were borne by those white sheep, and they began to open their eyes and to see, and to cry to the sheep. Yea, they cried to them, but they did not hearken to what they said to them, but were exceedingly deaf, and their eyes were very exceedingly blinded. And I saw in the vision how the ravens flew upon those lambs and took one of those lambs, and dashed the sheep in pieces and devoured them. And I saw till horns grew upon those lambs, and the ravens cast down their horns, and I saw till there sprouted a great horn of one of those sheep, and their eyes were opened. And it looked at them and their eyes opened, and it cried to the sheep, and the rams saw it, and all ran to it. And notwithstanding all this those eagles and vultures and ravens and kites still kept tearing the sheep and swooping down upon them and devouring them. Still the sheep remained silent, but the rams lamented and cried out. And those ravens fought and battled with it, and sought to lay low its horn, but they had no power over it. All the eagles and vultures and ravens and kites were gathered together, and there came with them all the sheep of the field, yea, they all came together, and helped each other to break that horn of the ram. And I saw till a great sword was given to the sheep, and the sheep proceeded against all the beasts of the field to slay them, and all the beasts and the birds of the heaven fled before their face. And I saw that man, who wrote the book according to the command of the Lord, till he opened that book concerning the destruction which those 12 last shepherds had wrought, and showed that they had destroyed much more than their predecessors, before the Lord of the sheep. And I saw till the Lord of the sheep came unto them and took in his hand the staff of his wrath, and smote the earth, and the earth clave asunder, and all the beasts and all the birds of the heaven fell from among those sheep, and were swallowed up in the earth, and it covered them. And I saw till a throne was erected in the pleasant land, and the Lord of the sheep sat himself thereon, and the other took the sealed books and opened those books before the Lord of the sheep. And the Lord called those men the 7 first white ones, and commanded that they should bring before him, beginning with the first star which led the way, all the stars whose privy members were like those of horses, and they brought them all before him. And he said to that man who wrote before him, being one of those 7 white ones, and said unto him, Take those 70 shepherds to whom I delivered the sheep, and who taking them on their own authority, slew more than I commanded them. And behold they were all bound, I saw, and they all stood before him. And the judgment was held first over the stars, and they were judged and found guilty, and went to the place of condemnation, and they were cast into an abyss, full of fire and flaming, and full of pillars of fire. And those 70 shepherds were judged and found guilty, and they were cast into that fiery abyss. And I saw at that time how a like abyss was opened in the midst of the earth, full of fire, and they brought those blinded sheep, and they were all judged and found guilty and cast into this fiery abyss, and they burned. Now this abyss was to the right of that house. And I saw those sheep burning and their bones burning. And I stood up to see till they folded up that old house, and carried off all the pillars, and all the beams and ornaments of the house were at the same time folded up with it, and they carried it off and laid it in a place in the south of the land. And I saw till the Lord of the sheep brought a new house greater and loftier than that first, and set it up in the place of the first which had been folded up. All its pillars were new, and its ornaments were new and larger than those of the first, the old one which he had taken away, and all the sheep were within it. And I saw all the sheep which had been left, and all the beasts on the earth, and all the birds of the heaven, falling down and doing homage to those sheep, and making petition to and obeying them in everything. And thereafter those 3 who were clothed in white and had seized me by my hand who had taken me up before, and the hand of that ram also seizing hold of me, they took me up and set me down in the midst of those sheep before the judgment took place. And those sheep were all white, and their wool was abundant and clean. And all that had been destroyed and dispersed, and all the beasts of the field, and all the birds of the heaven, assembled in that house, and the Lord of the sheep rejoiced with great joy, because they were all good and had returned to his house. And I saw till they laid down that sword, which had been given to the sheep, and they brought it back into the house, and it was sealed before the presence of the Lord, and all the sheep were invited into that house, but it held them not. And the eyes of them all were opened, and they saw the good, and there was not one among them that did not see. And I saw that that house was large and broad and very full. And I saw that a white bull was born, with large horns, and all the beasts of the field, and all the birds of the air feared him, and made petition to him all the time. And I saw till all their generations were transformed, and they all became white bulls, and the first among them became a lamb, and that lamb became a great animal, and had great black horns on its head, and the Lord of the sheep rejoiced over it, and over all the oxen. And I slept in their midst. And I awoke and saw everything. This is the vision which I saw while I slept, and I awoke and blessed the Lord of righteousness and gave him glory. Then I wept with a great weeping, and my tears stayed not till I could no longer endure it. When I saw, they flowed on account of what I had seen, for everything shall come and be fulfilled, and all the deeds of men in their order were shown to me. On that night I remembered the first dream, and because of it I wept and was troubled because I had seen that vision.